Hey guys, welcome back to another tutorial. Today we're going to be working on this Hydro Sport. Say hello to my cat. She wanted to say hi. This is for my sister-in-law. So she had requested that I just create something dark and moody and gave me some colors that she wanted. I let her pick out some vinyl patterns and I just kind of surprised her from there. So I don't recall where I got this vinyl. I've had it for a very long time and I cannot think of who the supplier is, but I do know that they don't sell vinyl anymore. I wish I could remember who it was. There are a lot of these types of vinyls out on the market, so I would just maybe look for some skull or skeleton vinyls, something like that. It should pop up. It's a pretty common pattern. So what we're going to do is take the 12 by 12 sheet of vinyl and I'm going to cut it into a little triangle. From there, I'm going to first of all make sure that my pattern is facing the correct direction before doing the vinyl, because we're doing this triangle at the bottom, so you want to make sure that your pattern's not upside down when you cut it. And then once that's cut, we're going to line the bottom of the tumbler with a straight horizontal line so the vinyl will go on straight. And from there, we're going to use the hinge method to apply this vinyl. I use this a ton on my channel, and the hinge method is when you cut about 1 inch of the backing off of the vinyl, you're going to hinge that to the tumbler as a little anchor, and then we're going to press the vinyl onto the tumbler while we're pressing the backing off of the vinyl in the process, and you should have a pretty nice and clean design. So from there, we're going to cut off any excess on that seam line, make sure everything is nice and flat, and then we're going to start our tape work. If you have any marker like mine, you can just use some acetone or rubbing alcohol to wipe that away. If you're using a hydro, I would recommend taping off the top rim of this. You don't want any epoxy getting slopped over the sides of where the screw, I guess, is. I don't really know what to call that, but basically where the lid screws onto the tumbler. If you get epoxy there, it's not going to create a tight seal, and then you're going to have a leaky tumbler. So I would just recommend taping that off, and because you don't want to get a bunch of spray paint in your cup, you can't fit your hand in these, so if you get spray paint in your cup, it's going to be pretty hard to get that out of there if you can't fit your hand down in there to wipe it out. So what we're going to do is we are going to tape off with a 1-inch painter's tape or a masking tape right up against that V-split or that triangle. We don't want it to overlap that vinyl that we laid down. And we're going to tape that off, and then we'll go ahead into our first section of spray paint and glitter. If you have any paint overhang, you want to make sure to trim that off nice and straight. We do want a clean, crisp square or triangle, I guess, at the top point, basically, because that is going to be glittered. So we want to make sure that is in line with the vinyl points, and that they're not offset or anything like that, that they're not crooked or wavy, because it's going to show through. So we're going to cut off any excess overhang and make sure everything is down nice and tight. When you spray paint this, you don't want any of that spray paint or glitter or epoxy to seep underneath that tape. So just make sure that's nice and tight, and I will see you guys in the next step. I didn't show the spray paint portion of this process. You guys have seen me spray paint several times. You're just going to use whatever color palette you prefer, and you're going to go back and forth to create a good paint blend. From there, we're going to apply the epoxy to that spray painted section, and we are going to glitter and ombre using the epoxy method. I am working from the bottom to the top. It happens to be light to dark. Typically, I work dark to light to make sure I don't have any cross-contamination of dark glitter into my light glitter. But with this one, it just was easier for me to go lightest to darkest to make sure I could fit everything on that cup. So we're going to just kind of lay down a roadmap with our chunkiest glitters first, and then we'll go in with our fine cut glitters and just fine tune that blend to make sure we've got a good cascade between the lighter and the darker glitters, and we don't have any harsh lines. Now that all my chunky glitters are laid down, I'm going to go back in with the finer cut glitters just to make sure we've got a nice, good blend on those colors. So we'll just kind of tip our cup upwards so we can cascade the lighter colors into the middle section. Same thing, middle section, we're going to cascade it into that darker section in the top and make sure that we've got a good fine blend from the dark into the middle. We're going to tip the cup downward so we can get that darker color gradient down into that middle section, if that makes sense. Don't forget the bottom. I'm using the same color that I used on the top, which is Lestrange from Peachy Glitters. On that base, we want to make sure to pat down any chunky glitters with a piece of printer paper. That's just going to lessen the coats of epoxy that we need to put on the cup to get a nice smooth tumbler. So I wouldn't recommend patting down the dark sections and moving into the light sections because it's going to be very noticeable. I would try to keep the glitters separate when you pat this down with this paper, just so you don't have a bunch of dark glitter in the light glitter section. And then once that's all patted down flat, we are going to immediately remove that tape and put that on the hanger so the epoxy underneath that glitter can dry. Don't forget to pull that first section of tape that we put down, that V shape that we put directly above that vinyl. That needs to be removed as well. Otherwise, all of your glitter and epoxy is going to stick to that, and you're not going to be able to get that tape off without wrecking the entire design. Once the epoxy underneath that glitter has dried, I did spray seal that with Krylon Triple Thick Spray. I would do probably 2 to 3 pretty heavy coats, just so we don't have any glitters migrating into sections where they don't belong. From here, we are going to tape off another V shape, but this time we're going to put the painter's tape directly on top of that skeleton vinyl and directly on top of the glitter. We want that 1-inch piece of stainless to be completely exposed because we are going to paint and glitter that. So we want to make sure there's no tape in that stainless section. Again, we're going to cut off any excess tape, making sure that we've got a nice clean point on both ends. And then very carefully, because I was not careful and because I did not use tape that was big enough, we want to spray paint this section white or use acrylic paint that's white. If you're spray painting it, definitely cover up all of the glitter and all of the vinyl. If you're using a brush, I would use a painter's tape a little bit wider than what I used because I definitely got paint in the vinyl section. I did do 2 coats of this acrylic paint, and then I let that dry. I just wanted to make sure I had good paint coverage before putting this white glitter down. I did not pull that tape up between the time that I put the 2 coats on there and the time that I put the epoxy on there. It wasn't going to pull up. It wasn't like a thick enough, I don't know. I just didn't do it and it didn't pull up. It was fine. If you're letting it sit for like days and hours at a time, I would definitely pull it up, but this was a pretty quick process, so it didn't really have time to adhere to the epoxy or anything and lift that up. So once we've got that epoxied, we're going to glitter it with Girl's Best Friend from Chase Ray Creations, and once all of the excess glitter is tapped off, I'm going to immediately remove that painter's tape that I put down so it doesn't adhere to the epoxy and stick to the cup. And I'm going to brush away any excess glitter once that is pulled up. We're going to set that on the Tumbler drying rack to dry. And then again, we're going to go back in with another probably 2 to 3 coats of Krylon Triple Thick Spray to seal in all of that glitter. I didn't want any white glitter in the black sections, and I definitely did not want any black glitter in the white section. I like clean, crisp tumblers, and this is how I achieve that. So from here, we're going to use a quick coat or a fast setting epoxy coat from Flynn Sisters Supply Shop. I'm going to put that down over my whole tumbler, making sure again that we're not slopping that over the edge of that top rim. We don't want the lid to be loose fitting so our tumbler leaks. And we're gonna let that cure for a little bit. I did go in and I put some chunky glitter in the vinyl section. It looked a little plain, but also because I got paint in the vinyl section and I wanted to use that glitter to cover that paint up. So I did just go back in after I torched it. Hi, it's me 2 months later. I was just going to post this video this weekend and was looking over it and realized that somehow the rest of my voiceover got cut off. So here I am 2 months later doing the rest of this voiceover. Anyway, so after the epoxy was torched, I put in some glitter, chunky glitter, into the remaining epoxy that I had left over, and I just kind of finger painted that in the sections and kind of concentrated a little bit more glitter on the section where the paint was to hide my mistake. And then we're going to torch it one more time since we've stirred up all those bubbles in the epoxy, just quickly on the bottom half. We're going to let that spin for a couple of hours until it is fully cured, and then we can go in with a second coat of the regular setting epoxy. If you did tape off your rim at the top, make sure that you are peeling that before you let that fast setting epoxy cure, otherwise you're going to have tape stuck to it, and when you pull it off, it's probably going to lift your epoxy up as well. So next we're going to go in with this hot mess of a decal situation. I thought that I could use a vinyl bleach spot, and it looks awful. So it was too small, first of all. Second, it was too transparent. I needed something a little bit more opaque, and I didn't want to put spray paint on it underneath it and kind of cross-contaminate the other sections of glitter. It was too small of a space, basically, to be able to do the spray paint without affecting the other areas. So pulled that off, ditched that idea. My next idea was to put this Banff Custom Creations sticker cal on there, and I don't know what I was thinking, but obviously you can't put a black decal on a black glitter base because it's not going to show. So that was dumb. I don't know what I was thinking. Pulled that up, and I ended up just kind of coming to terms with the fact that I had to create my own decal and do multiple layers so it would have an offset that didn't blend in with the base. So that's what we'll show next. But what I'm doing now is just lining the V-split with some silver textured metallic. This is from Tech Wrap Craft. I believe I cut it at like a 0.13 0.3 in width and then 0.13 in height and 11.5 in width. And then where those kind of lines cross over, we're just going to cut it off and make sure we've got nice, clean, crisp points where the points are in the glitter sections. And then I'm going to go over that with a white pearlescent vinyl from Tech Wrap as well. It is probably a 0.10 if I had to guess. Like I've told you guys before, I just have a whole kind of basket of striped vinyl on hand, so I don't know the exact measurements of this one, but just a little bit less than the first vinyl stripe height. So there's just a little bit exposed. The silver was just a little bit too much for me, so I decided to do an offset on that as well. And again, making sure that we are cutting our points exactly where they're at on the first layer of the vinyl, as well as the glitter V-split points. So all of our V-splits are lined up. It does look very wonky if they're not lined up. That's why I'm talking about this, because I've done it before and it is completely noticeable when your two V-split points don't meet up. So just pay extra attention to that. And then I decided to incorporate some black vinyl into the striping. And this one is even smaller than the white stripe, so probably like a 0.08 or a 0.07 maybe. And we're just going to line that above where the top of the V-split is in that glitter section. Totally optional. You've got all of your splits covered at this point. This was just more of a cosmetic thing because I liked the look of it. So we're going to cut off the excess on that. And then I ended up just cutting this out and making this decal myself with some fonts that I had on hand. I will get the fonts for you. I don't remember what they're called, but I will link them for you guys if you decide to recreate this. So I just did black vinyl for the top, and then I did an offset of about 0.53 is what I typically do in Cricut. And that is in the white pearlescent vinyl that I used in the stripes. So all of my vinyls are coordinating. Didn't want anything that was like, I didn't want to introduce a new vinyl basically. So I just used that pearlescent vinyl and I lined up the offset, and then we're going to go ahead and put that in that middle section where I put my two failure decals. I don't recall the size of the decal that I made, but typically my decals are somewhere between 3 and 3.5 inches. Of course, that is going to depend on the size of your tumbler. This one, it's a little bit of a bigger cup, so if I had to guess, I would say probably like 3.25 maybe, but of course you're going to have to measure just to make sure it fits within that V section on your specific tumbler. Skinny tumblers are going to be a little bit smaller, so maybe adjust to that. And then we are going to use the hinge method to apply this. I just eyeballed it center in that top V-split section. And then I'm going to hinge that transfer tape to the tumbler so we can make sure that everything is centered. And then we'll just pull the backing off and lay the decal down. This was a little bit offset when I put it on here, so I just lifted up that black section of the vinyl and repositioned it. I did forget to do the bottom as well, so don't forget to stripe off the bottom section. It wasn't very noticeable, obviously, because I just completely overlooked it. But it was nice and clean and crisp, so if I did forget it, it wasn't going to be the end of the world. But don't forget that section if that is what you want to do. And that is it for the vinyl. We're going to put this on the turner with a coat of polycrylic or some type of sealer, something to seal this vinyl in, especially that serial killer font. That you can't really tell, but it is very jagged. It's got a lot of like erratic cuts in it, and so it really easily lifts up under the epoxy. So I actually did 2 coats of polycrylic over top of that because I knew I've used that font before and I knew that it was going to be problematic. I didn't want the headache with this tumbler, so I just went over it a second time to make sure everything was nice and flat. And then I went in with my final 2 coats of epoxy. I believe this is the fast setting epoxy, and I did 1 more over top of that. At this point, I didn't tape off my top rim. As you can see, I'm working on another hydro next to it, so I was pretty well versed in making sure that I didn't slop that epoxy over that top rim at this point. If you don't tape it off and you do get some epoxy over it, just take a wet wipe or a paper towel with some either rubbing alcohol or acetone, and you can just run your finger along the rim and it creates a nice crisp line and you don't have to tape it off. So if you want just a quick way to do it, if you don't want to do the tape. But anyways, after that is fully cured, this is the end result. One thing I did forget to mention, put your lid on your tumbler to make sure that it lines up with either the point or the decal. I've done it before where the lid is off kilter, it doesn't match up, so it looks kind of weird. But anyways, that's it for this tutorial. I'll shut up now. I will see you guys in the next video. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.